In the last lesson, we included super tests to help us test our HTTP endpoints. And we are making requests for these endpoints, and we can see that we are getting 200 successful responses. But if we want to take these steps one step further, we would actually check the data that gets returned to make sure that is correct as well. Let's go ahead and navigate to our exercise files. So in Chapter 10, Lesson 9, under the Start folder, under the Test folder, I'm going to open up our app.spec.js file. And the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to check the data that gets returned from our GET request to the dictionary API. Some of the easiest data for us to check is actually JSON data, because all we need to do is convert a text response to JSON and then check the response. So in this case, when we do a GET request for the dictionary API, the test that we have created down here on line 30, we expect to see our test data, this.defs, that we created on line 16. So instead of just invoking the done function in the end of this test, I'm going to add a callback function. Super test, when it ends a response, will invoke a callback function where it will pass any errors and it will actually pass the response itself. So we can actually check the response. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to protect this definitions variable, our test data, so that it doesn't fall out of scope. I'm going to create a variable called defs, and I'm going to set it to this.defs. And the reason that I do this on line 32 is because when I start checking the definitions on line 34, I'm going to be inside of a callback function, so this will fall out of scope. So what we're going to do are check the terms that are getting returned from the GET request to our dictionary API. So I will set a variable for terms to be JSON parse our response text. So our terms that get returned when we make a GET request of this API should be JSON text. And now I've just created an array. And what I want to do is I'm going to expect this array of terms that gets returned from our GET request should exactly equal to deep equal our defs. So making a GET request for our dictionary API should return our fake data that we defined on line 16. Whenever I use toDeep equal, I can compare two full objects. So now I'm going to compare the array of terms that's returned from the dictionary API request to the array of definitions that we set up on line 16. They should be exactly the same. We need to invoke Mocha's done function as well. So this is an asynchronous test. We need to tell Mocha that the test at this point would be finished. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we can navigate back to the terminal, clear the previous test results, and we can run this again. And we see that our tests do in fact pass. So we are actually checking the data to make sure it equals what we think it should equal. And to demonstrate this working, we're also going to make the test fail. So if we expect terms to deep equal, I don't know, an empty array, then this test should fail because we're actually getting two terms returned when we make a GET request to the dictionary API. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, clear our response, and we can run our test again. And now we see that this test has failed because this red array that we see here is actually being returned when we make a GET request, and we expected it to be an empty array. So that was just to test our test. We want to go back into our spec document and make sure that we are comparing this to the defs, so this test does in fact pass. Now, when we hit the home page, we have a test for that up here on line 8. We can also check this response as well. If I add a callback function in place of our done call here, super test will give me any errors as well as the response object. Now, the response text in this case is going to be HTML. There is a module that we can use to help us check this returned HTML DOM. It will allow us to search the DOM the same way we can search a DOM with jQuery. This module is called Cheerio. So I'm going to come up here to line 3 and include Cheerio. And we will require Cheerio. And now what I want to do inside of this test here is I am going to create a variable for this $sign alias. And what we're going to do is we are going to load the response text into Cheerio into the $sign alias. So we will say Cheerio.load, and we're going to load the response text. And now that means I can search this response just like I would search a jQuery DOM. So I'm going to check the page heading. And the page heading represents the title that we see above the dictionary. So that is the body, heading 1, first child. So Cheerio will take our DOM text and allow us to add these CSS selectors, just like jQuery, for selecting an element on the return DOM. And just like jQuery, I can also get the text that is inside of this heading 1 element. And that's what I'm going to check, because I expect this page heading to equal ski dictionary. So now we have actually checked the response. We've checked an HTML response here in the test that we've declared on line 9, and we've checked a JSON response in the test that we've declared down here on line 35. So let's go ahead and save this and go out to the terminal, clear our previous tests, and we can run our tests. Whoops, we forgot to install Cheerio. So we see this all the time. Cannot find module Cheerio. It just means that we forgot to install it. So npm install Cheerio, save dev. So we will save that to our dev dependencies. And now when we run this test, it should fail. And the reason it should fail is because the title that is returned on the home page is skier dictionary, not ski dictionary. I can demonstrate that by running our app, node app. And if we travel to localhost 3000 in the browser, we can see that the title on the page is in fact skier dictionary, not ski dictionary. So this is what this test would look like when it fails. We expected it to be ski dictionary, and what we actually got was skier dictionary. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the site, and I'm going to go back into my test. So as opposed to checking the page heading for ski dictionary, it actually should read skier dictionary. And I'm also noticing something that I forget frequently is to invoke the done function. So we forgot to do that. We want to tell Mocha that this test is finished as well. So I will add that in there. And now we can go back to the terminal, clear the terminal, run our tests. And now we hit those endpoints and actually check the responses. So you can check a JSON response pretty easily just through parsing the response text. And Cheerio is a tool that will help you check an HTML DOM for a response as well.